it's talking to the people and giving them the awareness, not only of the topic, but also the awareness of the other point of view. That is where you really have the big leverage, because if that works, then you're talking about solutions, technological solutions, processes, automation, and then you really benefit it. But the people are key.
Hi, I'm Rourke Pollock, and this is the first season of the Secure Tracks podcast, where we host rail industry leaders to talk about operational rail technologies and cybersecurity. In this episode, we're hosting a guest from one of the biggest rail operators in Europe, and we'll be talking about some of the challenges associated with operational rail tech cybersecurity. Today's conversation should be exciting. We have Christoffer Neesen from Deutsche Bahn. But one disclaimer here, Christoffer's views and opinions in this podcast are his own and do not represent the views and opinions of Deutsche Bahn. Christoffer is the Senior Manager of OT Security at Deutsche Bahn and is based out of Berlin, Germany. Christoffer has been in the cybersecurity role for Deutsche Bahn for the last 3 years and is leading the company's OT security program. Prior to Deutsche Bahn, Christoffer held a variety of information security and product roles with TÜV Rheinland Intertraffic, Knorr-Bremse, PowerTech, and Bombardier Transportation. Further, Christoffer has degrees in industrial engineering, business, a master's degree in information security from the University of London. Christoffer, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Christoffer. One of the things I usually like to do is ask people how they got into cybersecurity, because a lot of us came into the industry in roundabout ways. You perhaps are one of the very few guests that we've had or we've talked to that actually has a formal education in information security. So maybe instead of trying to explain how you got into information security, which is pretty obvious at this point, maybe just talk a little bit about how you got into the rail industry and cybersecurity specifically in the rail industry.
Yeah, sure. Well, that was quite a funny story. My first job was in the consulting area for supply chain management. And after a year, I decided it was not the way I wanted to go. So I was looking for a job ads and found one for a trainee program with Bombardier back then for supply chain management, for procurement. So so I went there, I went for the application, and then they told me, I'm sorry, the job is gone, but we have a different one in project management. So I went with the trainee in project management and started my rail career at Bombardier. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that was pretty easy then. You didn't take nearly as long enough to figure out what you wanted to do with your life as some of us did.
No, it was just life as it happens. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how it happens. Yeah, take it a roundabout way. So let's jump into our first topic of conversation. And I thought what we'd talk about is the different challenges that you see in securing operational rail tech environments. And we all know that these rail operations are being digitized at a fast pace and interconnected with other corporate network systems. And basically the buzzword, I think, especially us marketing people like to talk about, is IT, OT convergence. But from your perspective in the trenches, what's the reality from your perspective? And can you give us some examples that show or demonstrate how some of the rail operational systems are actually being interconnected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that that topic, this conversion, happening very quickly and strongly. I mean, systems used to be isolated, so OT systems would run like in their own island mode, I would say. And now you see that they're getting more intelligent. So, like if we look at the machineries, we're looking at topics like predictive maintenance, condition-based maintenance. So you're making connectivity to machines that were isolated before to get operational data. So the primary motivation is getting operational excellence, so benefiting from that. And that right away brings along the question of cybersecurity. So we have a lot of topics with IoT, IoT, cloud connectivity happening. And that is in the machinery part. And if you look at the trains, we see a lot of diagnostic platforms. So the big system integrators have diagnostic platforms where they have access to their data and offer like an additional benefit against a few coins for the operators.
Right, right. That makes sense. I mean, it's mostly for the benefit of the operations organizations and the maintenance organizations, bringing in better efficiencies, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. And it raises a lot of questions because now if you look at the Purdue model, you are now making links, between the
Mhm.
highest level and the lowest level. And of course, it is in a surrounding which is 20 years behind that of the IT security. So,
Right,
of course, to get a maturity level here into it, it is, it takes a lot of effort.
right. Yeah, one of the things that I hear, and I'll be transparent. I hear this from the vendor community quite a bit, is that these operational rail systems tend to be very unique, and in in the for to the rail industry, and that cybersecurity in these unique systems require some really unique features and capabilities. And I don't know if you run into this or you see this as much from your side, but do you have any examples that you can share about how the rail tech systems are in fact unique to the rail industry and the impact that may have on cyber security systems that you put into
Mhm.
place?
Well, first of all, it's a strongly regulated area. We have a lot to do with regulation, legislation, and supervisory authorities.
Right,
So that's one issue which we have to tackle, especially if you look at topics like patch management cycles. And that also brings us to the topic of very long life cycles. So you see, if you look at the classical rail development life cycle from RAMs, you have, requirements, breakdown, risk assessment, integration, testing. But then comes the operational phase. And the operational phase is 30, 40 years. So you have 3 to 5 years development, system integration, and then comes the long time, and that you have to handle now. It used to be different because with safety, you said, okay, I have a safe system. I make no changes. I said, just do the appropriate maintenance and keep the system running. So oiling, changing screws, etc.,
right,
tightening screws, the bolts and nuts, and and now it's like, oh, we have this whole long time and we need to obtain the cybersecurity in this system, and that is a completely new way of thinking for the engineers, for the operators, and of course for the regulation and legislation.
right, right. Yeah, that's a good point. When you and I talked before, one of the things that we talked about, and this may be a bit of out of left field, but pardon the Americanism, that's a baseball saying, by the way. But what's your take on the whole conversation recently around AI, especially the popularity of tools like ChatGPT that people are talking about? I mean, do you see this movement as something that helps security teams in the rail industry, or do you think this is just yet another threat vector?
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, if every time you would get a dollar, you hear a chat GPT,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to work almost.
We'd be
Um,
retired, wouldn't we?
yeah,
No.
definitely. Well, I mean, in looking at large language models, it's fascinating what it can do. It's a
Right.
bit of a magic box. People putting more, we say, emotions into it than it really can do. So I think from my point of view, it's important to see where can it go with technology, what will it bring in the future.
Hmm.
So not to see it as an immediate threat, but to as a warning to see what must we prepare, because it's like an ongoing game between attackers and defenders. So we have to see what threat is coming, how can we react to that. That is the point about it. And from that point of view, I think it's good that it happens now, because like you say, you always overestimate the change within the next 10 years and underestimate the change in the next 2 years from the
Yeah.
technological change. So this is a disruption for sure. It's getting larger and larger, and new ideas will come up. You will use it to the good and to the bad.
Gotcha. Now, are your teams using perhaps ChatGPT or any of the other similar tools in daily work today, or experimenting with some of the different tools?
No, ChatGPT, not. I also know of a lot of companies that prohibit it.
Yeah.
If you look in the banking industry area or government agencies, it's because it learns. Anything you feed into it, it keeps inside and its mind.
There's a lot
And
around intellectual property and
yeah,
their information. Sure.
right. So
Yeah.
what you rather use is like um, what do you call it? Like optical recognition. Like if you have projects looking at graffiti detection on the train, that way the maintenance team already knows, oh, there's graffiti on the train. We have to get a cleaning team out there because there's always a penalty on that from the from the city that gives us the
Hmm.
contract, or the state that gives us a contract for the operational services. So that's why there you always have to look that there's no graffiti on the trains and keep track.
Interesting. Yeah, there's something I never thought about. Is how
Mm.
to detect and get rid of the
Yeah,
graffiti on trains. Uh,
yeah, right.
Interesting. A good question. So, how do you think, as you're looking at OT security or the security in the rail tech operational systems today, how would you compare where we are today and the job that the industry's doing in the operational areas compared to where we are in IT cybersecurity, given that we have such a much longer history thinking about IT cybersecurity?
Mhm. Well, as you said, IT is already, IT security is already established. It's known. With OT security, sometimes you get the reply, is it a typo? Did you actually mean IT, not OT? And it's like, no, it's the operation technology. And you need a lot of awareness. You still have to, because it's the people are key in this case. You can only put as much technology into security and to a certain point, but the users, the people that operate the trains and the machinery, they are key, and you have to make their life, their daily work easier, that it integrates, and that makes then OT security success.
Yeah. I agree with that. There are many more people involved in OT cybersecurity than in general IT cybersecurity. Makes
Right.
it an easier job, I'm sure, from your standpoint. Um, how do you thinking about the people and not necessarily the people within Deutsche Bahn or any rail operator, but the broader community? How do you think about or view the relationships that the rail operators have today with the integrators, the rail integrators, the cybersecurity vendor community? Do you feel like the integrators and the vendors are working closely with the operators today to really address some of your security concerns and challenges, or are there things that we all need to work on?
Hmm. What we see is the collaborations forming. So system integrators, train manufacturers are looking to collaborate to get that knowledge into their portfolio, and to be able to offer it to operators.
Right.
Within the operators, it always differs how the system is in their country, because I can speak, for example, in Germany, we are in competition. So we have to win public tenders. And in
Hmm.
those tenders, the state defines what they want. So if they don't say, oh, we want Wi-Fi, we want this and that, then of course nobody will offer it. So that's where it starts. It's more state-driven, what they expect and want, and that can be different from nation to nation, though.
So, do they set a minimum baseline that you have to adhere to, and then you can go above and beyond that, or do you
Right.
need to stick to that minimum baseline?
Right. You have the minimum baseline, and then if you have a certain size, at least in Germany, if you're critical infrastructure, then
Mhm.
you have to reach a higher baseline, because
Okay.
you fall into a regulation, legislation perspective.
So different operators have different requirements based on the scale of their operational environments.
Correct. If you're a very small one, you only have 5 trains, you have a lower baseline.
Right. You probably have a lot less automation and things as well, I would assume.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Got it. So, as you think about where we are today, and I'm sure that given the fact that you're in charge of the OT security programs there at Deutsche Bahn, you're constantly thinking about what's coming down the road, or down the tracks in this case, pun intended. But as you look forward, maybe let's say 3 to 5 years down the tracks, what are you most concerned about, or maybe what do you think are going to be the most difficult challenges that you have to deal with, or that operators in general have to deal with?
I think they really have to deal with the organizational change, because there are a lot of standardization works out there, guidance documents, but nobody really answers the question, how do you integrate into your organization? And that is something which no one can answer, generically or generic for everybody. So, and for that, you need the people. You need the colleagues that understand, what is OT security, what is the goal. You need management. You need management backing, because cybersecurity is always seen as a cost factor. What do we get for it? And I always say it's a bit like a house insurance. Everybody has it. Everybody hopes it never happens, but it costs money. It saves you something. And that's how security is.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Do you see these programs? I mean, I'm assuming they take a lot of top-down commitment to really happen, that they can't necessarily be driven from the bottom up without that top-level executive commitment.
Right. Absolutely. You need the top-level executive commitment here, and it has come top-down. And depending on the size of enterprise, it's like a huge tank. And this, to steer a huge tank is comparison to a small little sports ship. It just takes some time. And you just see the landscape is so different. Even within an enterprise, you have machinery which is older, which is more modern. The variety is that which makes it more complex.
Yeah, I mean, you've got different organizations involved. Each organization has to learn kind of a little bit about the other's domain, so it gets very complicated.
Right. So it's winning the people, that they understand that OT security helps them and doesn't hinders them. Like, oh, don't call it security people. Oh, they're just gonna shut everything down. Like, no, we'll help you. Yeah, that's the point. That is the most work you have to do it in the beginning, and to rise in maturity. I think that is a challenge. And also the challenge is, of course, the changing threat landscape. We've seen with the Ukraine conflict and war that the threat landscape, which was before unimaginable here in Europe, has changed. Like within weeks, it was like, what is happening? So that also is something which we've noticed, that you have to be more adaptive and think the impossible or impossible.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I would say it's not even in Europe. I think unrest anywhere in the world can create cyber issues. It doesn't matter if it's on your doorstep or on the other side of the planet. Cyber doesn't really have any borders.
Right, it doesn't have any borders, and that's something which you really learn. People were like very busy with the news, but you didn't see what was happening behind the news in the cybersecurity realm, I would say.
Right.
And there was like frontiers that you didn't know before were like blurred. And I think that really woke up a lot of people, governments, organizations, and now we have to see how we react to this, because at the end of the day, safety is key. Is that what we must uphold with cybersecurity? And we transport people. I mean, that's why we need to react and be prepared. Yeah.
Right, 100% agree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's change topics a little bit here and talk about. You mentioned earlier the world of regulatory frameworks. I know there's rail's not the only one. There's over a dozen critical infrastructure industries. They're all going through different transformations at different speeds. Some people like to talk about it as Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. How do you think the rail industry is doing relative to some of the other critical infrastructure industries as far as developing cybersecurity frameworks for the rail operational environments?
I would say we're on the way. I mean, when we started with the standardization group where I'm also active, we looked at other industries and said, what are the other people doing? I mean, we have automotive industry. They have connectivity, and what is the avionic industry doing? The
Right.
aviations. They have also internet on board, and no plane comes down. So they must have gone to tight, regulation and conformity assessments.
Hmm.
So you see there, like in the automotive industry, it's ISO 21434, and aviation also has like the DO 326A. It's very interesting because they integrated security and safety. That what in the rail industry at the beginning, everyone said, no, safety and security, how do we merge these, or do we keep them separate, and how do you synchronize it? So that is the issue where we are currently, and that's where I say we're on the way, because railway just takes a bit to to get on tracks, get on speed,
Right.
and yeah, we're looking right and left, and benefiting also from other industries.
Yeah, that's interesting. I assume most of the transportation industries are kind of similar. You mentioned two of them. I'm assuming things like busing, transportation, maritime, also have some of the same
Yeah.
similar problems or challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely learning from other industries or from other nations that have published guidelines, and also looking classical IEC 643 for industrial security, the golden reference point which we have in the
Right.
industry.
Right. Yeah, you hit on an interesting question that I had was with, I know you're a member of the working group that now is developing the new cybersecurity standard that's being called IEC 63452 for those that are keeping track. But it seems like today most of the operators in the rail industry are already following or relying on 62443. So why is there a new standard necessary, and what's going to be different with the new standard?
So looking back one step before, the TS 5071, which is now being turned in the IC 63452, which you mentioned, was like a guidance document. It was a lot of guidance, and now, because it was technical specification, and now we're going into the direction of the international standard. So a document where you can also have a compliance assessment against, so conformity assessment. And the difference will be that, first of all, the conformity assessment, and will be more precise, because a standard is short and precise in the requirement, and then can have a larger rational guidance section. But it will be more brief. And it will be also, from my point of view, stronger focus on IC 62443, and but with rail additions. In
Okay.
my personal view, in the future, we will even see a rail-specific profile, because IC 643 has now introduced or it's going to introduce profiles. So industry-specific profiles which you can add to the series, to the 6443 series. And that, I think, would also help if we see that coming in the future on top of the IC 6452. Yeah. It's a
So
long, it's almost like a password, 6452.
it's a bit of a mouthful. I finally got 62443 down where I can say it without thinking about it. Now you introduce another one, it jumbles up the numbers.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and I
But
know that.
it is,
I'm sorry.
yeah, just to add, so 643 is this so well-known industry standard. So the whole industry jumped on it because it didn't have anything for rail in their hand. It's well-known, it's structured, and used it, especially for their development life cycles, for their risk assessment. So
Yeah.
that's the reason why it's so dominant, and I believe it will remain dominant in the industry.
Right. And I know that the industry came out with TS 5701 just a few short years ago. And what's going to be different with IEC 63452? Will it replace 5701? Is it going to be in addition to? How do these fit together?
Well, there's some discussions about that, but one is in the direction. Okay, we're gonna then that's gonna become obsolete. The TS 5071 is then gonna be put aside, and then only the international standard will be continued. It's also important because of all the new European regulation which we have, Cyber Resilience Act, at least here in Europe.
Mhm.
They say they have a large regulational requirements now, and they say if you do not have industry-specific cybersecurity standard which you follow, you must follow all these requirements. So of course, the industries all are keen to have their cybersecurity standard, and that's also the reason why, for example, automotive is accepted from the Cyber Resilience Act, because they have their standard which they follow.
Got it. So the rail industry wants to come up with their own so that they're not beholden to the Cyber Resiliency Act.
Yeah.
At least on a point by point basis.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's the first I've heard of that. Okay, that's an interesting. Got it. And you mentioned it. A lot of this work on the IEC standards, at least from my viewpoint across the pond, the work being done on 63452, it seems like a lot of that work is being done out in Europe. How's the organization working with operators and other organizations more globally, especially in North America, Asia Pacific regions, to kind of hopefully push this as more of a global standard and have it more widely adopted?
Yeah, well, all the experts are invited to participate. It is an international project team, PT, before it becomes an international standard. We have colleagues from China, from Japan included, and there will be also a final review. So although we don't have continuous participation from the whole international community, at every meeting there will be review points where everybody can comment, and then the comment will be taken into consideration.
Got it. So where's the process stand today? Are there still opportunities for operators to get involved in the development of the standard?
I think currently now we're shortly before the first comment phase.
Okay.
So I think October, around that time, it's supposed to be commented. Yeah.
So they're very close to having the first draft of the 63452.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And do you know the timing of that, or is there a published timing?
Yeah, there's a published timing, but don't nail me on that. I think it's 2025. It's supposed to be published.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Got it. And are there other standards? I know the IEC standards have been developing and getting a little bit more worldwide adoption. Are there other standards in other parts of the world that are relevant in the rail industry as well that people are having to really pay attention to?
Well, I know that APTA or APTA has some standards published. We've also seen Australian standards being published, which were interesting. I recall that the former Working Group 26 that we looked at that, and also Singapore, the state or nation Singapore has also published something on that. They're also very keen on cybersecurity or OT security for railways, and even the Netherlands has issued things. So there are activities. But of course, no international rail standard. That's what we're working at.
Right, and even 63452 is an optional framework for people to adopt. Correct.
Yeah. Currently, it is. It will be interesting when we see what happens with the safety world, because currently in the safety case, it is there's a link to. It says you have to look at security, which can possibly impact safety-related functions. Right. And then it says, look at ISO 27001 or IEC IEC 62443 for inputs on how to handle that. Now it will be interesting to see if then maybe in the future we'll say, okay, also look at IC 63452. So
That makes sense. Okay, I did not know that. That's
yeah.
perfect. Excellent. All right, let's move on to our third topic. You already touched on this a little bit earlier. Let's talk about some of the organizational considerations, or maybe even culture changes that cybersecurity and the operational environment really brings up. You know, one thing, I guess it's a big challenge. You already mentioned it, that the rail tech systems or rail OT systems are owned by somebody else, namely the operations teams, the maintenance teams. So I'm sure this causes more challenges than dealing with IT security. How do you address some of those challenges and start to try to overcome those concerns?
Right. So what we have is we have two organizational sides. We have one, the CIO area, where IT security has always been
Mhm.
located, and then we have the CTO area, where we have the whole, technological operational systems running, and so you have to like bridge the gap. Yeah, you need the bridge makers, because you must decide for your organization. Okay, will I put the OT security to the CIO people that already have an understanding of cybersecurity,
Right.
or do I separate it and put it on the CTO area that have an understanding of the technological systems, the OT systems, but
Mhm.
not so much of the cybersecurity? So you have to see how do like CIO and CTO work together. Do they like each other or not? It's about people. I end up saying it's always
Right.
about people. Huh? So and then looking at how you integrate that. Yeah. Um, for us, I can say we've concentrated on the CIO area. We have strong bridge makers into the CTO area. You need communicators
Mhm.
that explain and take the people along the trip, the road, yeah, and the track.
Right. Right. Yeah, you touched on it. You know, I don't know many cybersecurity people that know much about rail. And probably my guess is most of the rail operations people aren't cyber experts either. How do you start to get these teams up to speed in each other's kind of domain enough that they're able to communicate and work together? Do they have any common systems where they're working off of the same data sets, or are they all looking at different data?
They're all looking at their own systems, so that's why you have to make the connection and bridge it, and also adapt in your how we say adapt in your like audio or audio targeted communication. So adapt your communication to and depending on who you want to reach, because someone who is a machine operator, and if you ask him, okay, what VPN are you using, can you give me the version of it? I would say, well, VPN, I have a machine. What are you talking about? So you must make it very explain it in a manner that he can understand, or she can understand what you want from them and why it is important. And the same is on the other side. If you have the security people, and then the workers come and say, hey, look, this button doesn't work, and I'm the keyboard always crashes, and I just connected something here because now it works easier with a USB stick. And
Right.
yeah, so it's talking to the people and giving them the awareness not only of the topic but also the awareness of the other point of view. That is where you really have the big leverage, because if that works, then you're talking about solutions, technological solutions, processes, automation, and then you really benefit it. But the people are key.
Yeah. Do your from a cybersecurity standpoint? So, does your organization do a lot of proactive outreach to the operation organizations and even possibly formal training programs?
Yeah, so training, awareness, even on workshop floor level, that is important, and also having reporting on each side.
Mhm.
So what is happening here, what is happening there, just to get this awareness. Because otherwise, people start, oh yeah, we can connect the system, and we're like, no, you don't connect anything here without speaking to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Got it. All right. And how are you finding that those efforts are working? Are they where you would want them to be, or are you making good progress and still work to do?
Yeah, I mean, the organizations, the web operators organizations are large, so of course there's always a lot of work to do, but it has improved within the last few years. That OT security is not mistaken anymore for a typo. There is something, and also to recognize that, wow, we have also a lot of OT assets, even more than IT assets. So that was also a step to a long way to go, and to get this acknowledgement from management and the people, that they understand it is important, and now we see the benefits coming slowly but surely. Yeah.
Right. Understood. So you mentioned it before. You've got two different organizations. You have the CIO organization where cyber resides, and you have the CTO organization where the operations teams reside. Who pays for all this from a budget standpoint?
That also will depend how you implement it. At the end of the day, if you put on the CIO side, and then have an arrangement with the CTO side, or divide it, that's more like an accounting topic, which they have to like arrange, because you must see how you divide it equally and fairly between the entities. Yeah.
You got it. I was just curious about the purse strings. Usually that
Mhm.
gives you better ability to make things happen if you've got some of the budget.
Yeah, it's always one addition. It's always the best way is if there's regulation, and it says you have to,
Right.
because like your critical infrastructure, you have to do this and that, and that is changing continuously. Then there's no discussion about who pays it. You have to do it.
Sure. Yeah. That's always a forcing function in the cyber world. Either
Yes.
that or something bad happens, and typically either one drive a lot of quick response. All right. So Christoffer, let's kind of start wrapping things up a little bit here. As somebody that doesn't day in and day out responsible for Railtech cybersecurity, as you think about the job that CISOs have to do, as far as being in the rail operator, we may have a number of other CISOs listening today. What kind of advice would you give those folks as they're thinking about diving more further into security in their rail tech or OT environments?
Yeah, I would say you need to get the bridge makers. You need the CTO and the CIO area to work together. That is key.
Mm-hmm.
Getting talk on the people that operate your OT systems. Get to know them, get to know their needs, because that is also a business need. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to uphold your business processes. Be resilient. So that you can never forget that it has a certain purpose. The OT security or the cybersecurity, and that's to uphold business and be competitive. And that's also what you can argument towards upper management to get their buy-in into this topic, and their backing. And then if you have that awareness, people, because OT is operated by people. It's not an app which runs on an automatic clock. It's people. Yeah.
Right. You touched on an interesting topic there, maybe a topic for another podcast appearance. We can talk about how to build a business case for some of these efforts in the operational environment. But you're spot on. It always comes back to supporting the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Christoffer, if somebody wanted to talk to you or get in contact with you, are there social media platforms that you're active on, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, please note Christoffer's on LinkedIn, and note the spelling of his first name. It's different and unique and stands out. So he should be easy to find because of that. Well, Christoffer, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I also want to thank all of our listeners today. That is the end of our show today. So until next time, keep your tracks secure.
Thank you.